Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of K-TEIN. Today, I'll be talking about Phantom Breaker Omnia due to the recent updates they've been sharing from Rocket Panda. So, Rocket Panda have been tweeting periodically about Phantom Breaker Omnia to keep the game in the collective mind of its fans. Sometimes these tweets will direct folks to their developers' diaries, mostly vignettes about Phantom Breaker's development history. Their most recent entry at the time of this video has their battle designer, Imizumi, speak on Phantom Breaker's mechanics and possible changes going forward in Omnia's entry. I have some thoughts over these changes and thought to share them with you all. These diaries have been a fun read, and I recommend anyone who's interested in the game to read them from themselves. So, on to the first point of this diary entry. So, this first entry states from Imizumi, in order to emphasize the dynamics of attacks, I've adjusted all the hit stops and overdrives. Clock up, solid armor had too many actively powerful properties, so I shifted a lot of those to more passive roles in the gameplay. I believe this will improve the learning curve for Phantom Breaker mechanics. So, to go on to the first part, the first part I'd like to talk about is, just the hit stops. From what I've seen for some of the videos they have posted up, the only hit stop changes that I at least were able to see from the in-game counter hit, they will last much longer. Well, rather, not say last longer. Let me say that there was more of a long pause when a counter hit has occurred. You can reference this similar to being Guilty Gear Strive, how they handle counter hit, though it's a bit more subtle. So I would say maybe the most accurate representation may be, I would say, how a Kingdom Heart Team Izumi's game, how they handle counter hit, where the character will get hit and there'll be a long pause before kind of going to the next frame to help allow players to identify what just happened. So there's that. But the one that really got my interest is how they believe that the overdrive mechanic has been considered way too powerful. I am not sure I agree with. I believe overdrive is in a good state at the time of Extra. It was high risk, high reward option. It uses up all your meters, so you need to at least have one bar or more to activate overdrive. And then upon activation, you did have the ability of one, regenerating your health, which is really good. Activation startup did have visibility frames, so you could kind of use it to make certain attacks with if you wanted to. It did put you back in neutral state, so you kind of was able to use it as a pseudo Roman cancel, an expensive one, but a pseudo Roman cancel. And depending on the styles, like clock up or solid armor, for clock up, it will make roughly the game run at half speed, with the player character who activated clock up will have the ability to cancel normal to special indiscriminately, or go from any. Let's just say it's pretty much exactly like Street Fighter's custom combo for the sake of simplicity. And solid armor, well, basically that person, when they activate solid armor, had the ability to withstand attacks, or basically just had armor to take in attacks. So that was what solid armor did, on top of solid armor having slightly a bit more damage output. Now, one of the trade-offs of those going into overdrive was you did not have the ability to block whatsoever. So when you do activate overdrive, you have to go all offensive initially when you use it. Secondly, because overdrive state kind of puts your character in a special mode state, any normal attacks you use were considered special attacks. Now, on one side, this did mean if your opponent were blocking your normal attacks, they were taking chip damage. But if they actually got hit, they were taking special attack damage, and special attack gave a lot of meter. I guess the best example of this in King of Fighters 13, the AC match mode, while it was very good and strong, sometimes players kind of were hesitant to use it in certain scenarios because you could just pop it immediately and kill a character. The problem is, once you pop HD mode and did the HD mode combos, usually your opponent was going to have a lot of meter left over to essentially just pretty much go Hail Mary with their meter, since you had none at the end of it, unless it was a round to win. So I believe that's one trade-off with going to overdrive, how it reward your opponent a lot of meter. Nestle, there's the fact that Nestle, if your opponent tries to grab you while you're in overdrive, it pretty much ends overdrive immediately. And even if you tech the grab, you still lose overdrive. So there is still a lot of risk to be concerned when it came to dealing with overdrive activation, where are you willing to use up all your meter and make sure you can either secure a Ren or leave your opponent with a lot of meter to use against you afterwards if you didn't secure a KO at the time of using overdrive. Actually, lastly, when you do use overdrive, you do experience an overheat state. Pretty much cuts off you from using your burst meter. And not only that, when you're on overdrive, you can't use mechanics such as ES supers. You can't use emergency mode. So you're or slip shift, or you couldn't even use set burst. So pretty much there was a lot of trade-off for going from overdrive, where you gained some benefits, but you also lost a lot of benefits. So I think the overdrive was already in a good place. So not sure if I would agree with that. And for the last part of this comment, they believe this will help improve the learning curve for Phantom Breaker's mechanics. When I read this, I've actually had the mentality that Phantom Breaker already did its job and more or less trying to make his fighting game be an accessible fighting game with the streamline. What they really need to do, in my opinion, is provide a much more robust learning tool for people to learn their game, a better tutorial. Phantom Breaker, at least up to Extra, does not have, I would say, a good tutorial. What they do offer is once a reference sheet will let you know, hey, these mechanics exist here, and this is how you do the mechanic. But they don't really go into the application of why you will want to use this mechanic, and it's other, and such as what does it beat, what does it lose to, what are the risks and rewards. It doesn't really go into that. It just says, hey, we have this mechanic, and this is how you use the mechanic. Well, not use, but this is how you activate that mechanic, and then that's it. Now, they did also offer a situation mode, which allows you, well, not allows you, but it basically acts like a mission mode where they'll task you to use certain mechanics, but it doesn't teach you. It's more just making sure you can do it, but doesn't actually still teach you the applications of it. I guess what we want to get to at the final part of this point is that it seems like they want to, they seem to have the idea that Phantom Breaker is still too complex of a game, where this is a fighting game. All fighting games are just complex, no matter how simple they attempt to make it. Even one of the most simplest fighting games, which I think that would be considered Dive Kick, is still considered a highly complex game due to how, even though it has a straightforward rules and it has minimum interaction on the player, because of how all the different characters work, there's still a lot of complexity that even novices still don't know how to handle or understand. So that will be my final point. On this matter, I think that they already did a job of streamlining the game, and they need to just add better teaching tools. I would say take a look from Under Night Embers, from Our System Works Guilty Gear, Grand Blue, and whatnot. Even NRS Studios has done a decent job when it comes to their teaching tools, where they tell you about mechanic, they do some freeze frames, they show you the mechanic in action, they let you know some of the risks and rewards of that mechanic, where this is where the mechanic is good, this is where it's good to use the mechanic, but this is what also beats that mechanic, and etc. etc. Allow players to test it out in applications and whatnot. So that's where I think I would think. Sorry, that's where I would advise Imizumi and the rest of the Phantom Breakers team to direct their attention to. So let's go on to the next point of this article. So, well, the next thing was there are also a lot of changes to one of Phantom Breaker's defining characteristics, the style variance. The basic functions have been brought closer to the original Phantom Breaker, while mechanics such as reflection and critical burst are now usable across all styles. So, what this thing is saying is basically they're going when they went from Phantom Breaker to Phantom Breaker Extra, they had the styles essentially be more I want to say dynamic. They made the styles much more distinct when they went from Phantom Breaker to Phantom Breaker Extra. But now going to Omnia, it seems like they want to revert back to Phantom Breaker, where the styles are a lot more similar, which I am not sure how I really feel about that. On one hand, it does kind of make sure that basically the styles are much more close together, so there isn't a superior style. In the original Phantom Breaker, even though the styles were sort of similar, Quick Style was still the superior style based off it having better stats and more utility. But when we went from Phantom Breaker to Extra, they made the styles much more different and distinct, and I think that actually did a better job of balancing it because there were so many distinctness that there are basically a lot more rewards and there are a lot of rewards and trade-offs to be had. Like in the original Phantom Breaker, both style was able to double jump, but when we go from Phantom Breaker to Extra, only Quick Style was allowed to double jump, while Hard Style didn't have the ability to jump. However, their jump allowed them directional influence, so it allowed them to do other different forms of air mobility. But then I also thought that was a decent trade-off because one of the major difference between styles, even from Phantom Breaker to Extra, is the nullify mechanic. The nullify attack, or the instant block mechanic in the game, if you will. And for Quick Style, they had a dodge, which was good for avoiding projectiles, but not so good in avoiding physical attacks. While Quick has something more akin to like a parry, with their instant block, where it will freeze the opponent and the player, but then they can act immediately. Now here's the thing here's where Hardstyle was kind of a little more significant. Hardstyle was able to use this nullify attack in the air. Quickstyle can only use it on the ground. So even though Quickstyle had maybe a much more, let's say, ease of use instant block, Hardstyle had more versatility behind it. And I think that kind of helped the balancing out while keeping them still distinct, where both still serve the function of trying to be defensive, but one was good at being defensive on the ground, while the other one could be usable in the air. Another distinct difference was while Hardstyle didn't have much mobility, it did have a larger grab range than Quickstyle. This was, I believe, introduced in Extra, while not in Phantom Breaker Original. But that's just many different. There's just a list of how different the styles became and distinct in Extra, going for Phantom Breaker, where Phantom Breaker really the only difference was what was your different nullify attack and how you use your counter burst. While Extra, it became more expanded, and another evidence toward them being more distinct and expanded is in Extra, Hardstyle got a different form of Phantom Breaker than Quickstyle. And original Phantom Breaker, level 2 supers, aka Phantom Breakers, they were the same throughout the hog. They were the same throughout everybody, regardless of the style. But in Extra, they made Hardstyle have a different Phantom Breaker that were more utility and less of a damage dealing super and whatnot. So again, when they were going to Extra, they were basically making the styles distinct. But now it seems they want to kind of revert that back and go towards all the styles being more similar, which I think kind of hurt one of the things. I think one of the things that made Phantom Breaker interesting and stand out was the fact that there were styles, and those styles kind of heavily change how you interact and play with characters. They weren't like variations from NRS games or a Moon system from Melty Blood. There were still characters that kind of played similar, but they had different mechanics at least. So their game plan at least were or at least altered significantly in that regards. The mechanic that they're going to share is Reflection and Critical Burst. Reflection was a mechanic that was exclusive for the Extra style, which I thought was good because Extra style does not have a nullified attack, aka an instant block. So they have Reflection, which is basically a much more stronger version of Counter Burst, your smash attack, where basically it acted almost like a parry, where I did already say parry before. Let's say more of a Tsubaki or a counter where if your opponent touches you when you're doing your counter burst, they get stunned and they can even get guard crushed in the process. That was exclusive to Extra style, but now it looks like they're going to put it on all style, which I'm not. I'm also basically questioning why even go to Extra style, because outside of Reflection, Extra style does not have access to Nullify attacks nor Phantom Breaker. So one of Extra's defining mechanics was Reflection, and now they're putting it on all styles. So once again, I feel this is like getting rid of the distinctiveness of the style, which I think was a benefit and positive of Phantom Breaker. And then Critical Burst was a mechanic that was exclusive for Hardstyle, which is the game's unblockable attack. One of the differences between Quick and Hardstyle's Counter Burst, Quick Style uses Counter Burst and has options to basically cancel their Counter Burst into something called a Slip Shift Dash or a Slip Shift Jump, High Jump. So you can kind of continue comboing. Hardstyle does not have that option to use Slip Shift, but if they charge their Counter Burst, they were able to make an unblockable attack. So that was the distinct difference. That was their distinct difference in advantages. One was slower but was unblockable. Another one's faster. Another one's faster but used up a lot of your meter to do so. So not really sure how I feel about them trying to go with make everything similar. Hopefully they can still make these styles distinct going forward, but we'll just have to see in that regards. So Imizumi also goes on to say, changes in Quick Style were mainly minor adjustments, whereas in Hardstyle, I reduced the number of combos and added directional attacks. Additionally, I've increased the damage in individual attacks and added some adjustment to certain special attacks. Now, I'm not too surprised to hear that they didn't want to change Quick Style too much, because as I mentioned in the original Phantom Breaker, Quick Style was kind of the superior style, with really one of the weaknesses it had was its defensive options, which they did improve that going into Phantom Breaker Another Code, where they allow Quick Style the ability to guard cancel into supers, which was originally exclusive for Hardstyle. I think it was okay to give Quick Style more guard cancel options, because Quick Style actually does have the weakest guard gauge. So even though they have more ability to guard cancel, at the same time, their guard gauge was one of the weakest. So they really couldn't use it that much or expose themselves. So I think that was kind of fine for the most part when they did that going into Another Code and Extra. And it seems like that's kind of what they feel. They feel right now Quick Style is in a good place, while Hardstyle looks like they basically want to nerf it. I will say, when going from Phantom Breaker to Phantom Breaker Extra, while initially Quick Style was the superior style, when we went to Extra, Hard Style was pretty strong. I won't say it was dominant, because I'll say certain matchups it definitely did lose. For starters, Hardstyle really does lose hard to zoning, in my opinion. So there was that. But at the same time, hardstyle also just had a lot more damage potential going into extra in the game of Phantom Breaker extra. So I kind of felt it balanced itself out for the most part. And it looks like they're looking to try to more or less. It's hard to say whether it's a nerf or not because they're taking away options, but then also buffing up other options. They're taking away the ability for them to basically do a lot more combo, which I admit, Hardstyle was, even though Hardstyle had less combo potential than Quickstyle, they actually still have a pretty large. They had a lot. They still had a lot of combo potential just due to how Phantom Nature is a chain game, and you have stuff like overdrive and supers and a lot of loops. So Hardstyle already had. So Hardstyle still had combos. They weren't as. They didn't wasn't as large as Quickstyle combos, but they still had combos. So now they're making it much more harder to combo in Hardstyle, which I think is fine because Hardstyle has a lot of damage. So damage and combo usually means people get one shot, and I could definitely say people got one shot a fair bit in extra because of that. So them reducing the combo potential, I think is fine, but they also give them additional attacks, which I think is interesting. Or I think they mean by added directional attacks. So I said additional. They say they're giving them added directional attacks. Now they've already. Now Phantom Breaker does have a universal directional attack with their forward medium and forward hard. The forward medium where everybody's universal overhead, while forward heavy was like a universal long range attack for most characters. So now they're gonna add more directional attacks, which I'm gonna assume gonna have some utility. Some characters did already have additional or character specific directional attacks, like Ren having an additional overhead from his forward light, or let's say Rhea, who has a long reaching low that can rapid cancel from her forward light as well. So I'm kind of interested to see how they're going to do the additional directional attacks in that. And they did say they gave Heartstar more damage as a whole. So it looks like Heartstar will still be able to one shot. They just won't have that much combo potential, which I think that basically means Hardstyle is going to have a hard time beating up their burst meter, their super meter, which originally I don't think Hardstyle even wanted to focus on that. They will want to focus on building the tension meter, which was your damage output meter. So I do think that is something that makes sense. Not makes sense, but it's a design choice that I'm always in agreement with and think is fine for the game as a whole. So yeah, I think that actually will more or less wrap up what I think about the developer's diary for Phantom Breaker. It has some things that I am concerned with, but I am gonna have faith that the team is knows what they're doing, and look forward to more stuff to come out. They did mention how they're going to be updating their web page to give more details into the style, which is something I'm basically looking forward to seeing. I am looking to see how they're going to handle the Omnia style, since Omnia is no longer going to have access to reflection, which I think was one of Omnia's defining mechanics. So it'll be interesting to see where they go from here.